So I try to build a fix and security master reconciliation tool in Python. This was a demo that I did for a firm named D.E. Shaw. This was part of the interview process. And I had hoped to sort of demonstrate my abilities. And I have to say, I learned a lot from the experience. And I wanted to share some of those lessons with you. So let me first of all give you the story of the application that I built. This was on my own design. During the technical phase of the interview process, they had a little scenario, super basic. My Unix tutorials, the knowledge from those tutorials pretty much covers what you would need to dominate in the types of questions that they were asking. It was basically they gave me a security master file, sample security master file, and they just wanted me to do some basic sort of, how many of this item, how many of that item, group by, not using SQL queries, but simply in the command prompt. Now, for me personally, the solutions that I would use for what they were looking for was awk. With awk, you can specify the particular field that you want to see using $1, $2, $3 for the field numbers. So I could easily isolate the field that I want. And there's additional operations that you can do to get down to exactly what you want and to display it in the way that you want, instead of sort of piping from one command to the next. So the suggested command that they had referenced was to use cut, which that's actually totally appropriate for something as small, a small data set. It was just a few lines. But for an actual security master, which could be massive because there's so many products, you may not realize this, but there's a lot of products, especially when you talk about an option chain. You got so many different contracts by month and expiry. Some firms, they append to their security master file, so it can grow and grow and grow and get very large. It would not be necessarily shocking, depends on the environment, to see a security master file that's in the gigabytes. I mean, maybe even 5 gigabytes, and then you have to look for sort of an edge case scenario where a couple of people, a couple of systems, more so the people in the systems, screw up in terms of the infrastructure guys aren't monitoring hard drive space as they should be, and they didn't pick up on this massive file and the disk-free space being so low. But in trading, we wouldn't or shouldn't be relying on infrastructure for things like that. You should be taking ownership of your servers. So you should have your own tools. So it's like you're kind of working in parallel. I mean, ultimately, the infrastructure is the domain of the infrastructure team, but infrastructure is part of the trading platform. And if you're in a trading ops role, then it is your responsibility to make sure that every component required for trading works. So, and this is one of the things about working in finance in terms of compared to other industries. In other industries, maybe it could fly that you say, in a failure, hey, the infrastructure guys, they didn't say anything. That ain't gonna fly in investment banking. The main thing was a reconciliation mission. You have fixed logs, which have trading activity, right? And you have something called a security master. So security being the instrument or the product. So stocks, bonds, options, futures, whatever it is, right? Whatever it is that you're trading. You have this master list. You can think of it, not in programming terms, but just conceptually as the product inventory or product dictionary. Or an index of some sort, has every possible tradable product in there. That file can be massive. Then you have fixed logs, which are logs that are records of trading activity, orders and executions, right? In whatever context, right? Open orders or orders from previous day, whatever it is. Thing is, what happens when in your fixed log, you have an order for a product, a security, let's just say a stock, that is not in your master list. You have a security master, your master list of securities, and then you have the fixed log with all these orders and executions. What happens, there's a symbol in your fixed logs, it's not in your security master. That is a problem. Or what the symbol is wrong. The symbol in the fixed logs is wrong. There was a change symbol, a corporate action. You have spin-offs, mergers and acquisitions, and other scenarios where the symbology might change. And for some reason, you're out of sync. You got the new stuff in fix, and the security master is not updated. The reference data guys that's their domain, keeping that up to date. For some reason, some process didn't run, or whatever the reason is. It's not up to date. We need to get it up to date. The first thing is we need to be aware of the problem. So that's the scenario. Identify these mismatches between fixed logs and the security master, and produce a report so you can alert the trade ops teams or the reference data teams that there's a problem so they can address it. And then I add it as a added feature, just me thinking about what would be a cool way to do this that's most helpful. So a couple of things I added as far as features. I added a sort of a prioritization, sort of, there is trading is obviously, it's all about money, right? This is all about, you're investing, you're trying to multiply your money, right? So I have an order for 100 shares of Apple versus I have an order for 1,000,000 shares of Apple. I think the 1,000,000 share Apple order is a bigger priority than the 100 shares, right? We want to have all of our orders go through, but ultimately you can't do everything at once. You have to have a priority system. So the priority is going to be about the main thing, the main risk, money, right? A lot of money's on the line, millions of dollars. So basically what I did is just do assign a value, quantify the value. So for example, if there's one symbol, let's say Apple, that there's a problem, and Apple has the most money behind it, meaning when you multiply the total amount of shares that are within that log in terms of orders, and you multiply that by the actual price, the amount of money behind all of them is highest in terms of, so that's a risk factor, right? So when you do that assessment, so basically what I did is a sort of a priority list. So which symbol has the most money behind it? And again, that's a calculation of total quantity of all the orders by the price, right? So if it's 1,000,000 shares total, you have a bunch of orders, and the quantity of each order adds up to 1,000,000. And then you look at the actual price on the orders, right? So just to be more accurate, if these are market orders, each order is going to have a different price. You'd have to do a calculation on an order by order level, right? But regardless, or just to keep it simple, you could just do average price, right? Because the main thing is you wanna highlight your biggest exposures, right? We got $1 billion associated with this particular symbol. We have 500 million associated with that symbol. Those are the two biggest dollar values that we have right now. We want to prioritize and focus on that first. We want everything to be synced up, but we want to jump on the highest value, issues first, because that's the biggest exposure, biggest risk to the firm. So I did that in the reporting. I had it sorted in that manner. So the basic workflow was, so first of all, through every step of the process, the fundamental principles that I was applying: efficiency. We want this to be as fast as possible. We want it to be, we want to minimize the impact to the server, because this is going to be running on a production server. We have critical applications on that same server. We don't want this thing to slow down the server, because that's a risk as well. Another process may fail or be slowed down or delayed. And by delaying that process, there could be a monetary loss associated with it. Calculation that should have been done, in microseconds took 5 to 10 seconds. And in that period of time, some event occurred that we incurred a loss behind it. So we want to make sure that this is something that's not going to be a resource hog. So every step of the way, I'm considering efficiency. Every step of the way, I'm considering security. This is investment banking. This needs to be a secure application. We have sensitive information. We don't want to expose sensitive client information to the wrong parties. We also don't want order information. We don't want to let out, what we're doing in terms of what trades we're doing or what our clients are doing. So efficiency, security are paramount. And of course, compliance. We want to make sure that we have some kind of audit system set up. We're doing what needs to be done in terms of compliance rules. So for example, we don't want to have passwords and things like that hard-coded in the application. We want to use encryption where necessary. So these are the things I'm considering throughout the entire process. But it starts with parsing. So input, output. We're starting with fixed log, security master. We need to ingest both of these, right? So in the spirit of efficiency, we want to pull in just what we need. From the fixed logs, we're pulling in the symbol, the security ID, so whether it's QSIP or CDOL, identifiers for the product that's being traded. We want to pull in price and quantity, so we could do the calculation in terms of the exposure based on the, how much money. And we want to get rid of all the rest. I don't want the rest. I just want to pull in just those things, because again, efficiency. We don't want to be taking all of this extra data and putting it in memory and giving the server more of a load than necessary, right? So we're pulling just the fields that we need, and we're storing it in some kind of efficient data structure. We're doing the same thing with the security master. That's typically going to be a bigger risk. That most likely would be the larger file in a lot of cases. So we want to pull in from the security master this information, but we don't want to put like a 5 gigabyte or 10 gigabyte file in memory, right? So what we do is we use a couple techniques. We have chunking that we use. So basically chunking, you're going to break up a large file into chunks or smaller sections. So imagine you have a box filled with I don't know, 1,000 bowling balls, I would presume that it's going to be extremely heavy and a person probably can't carry that, right? So imagine that person is the server. We don't want the server to be bogged down and brought to its knees literally because it's too much weight. So the chunking would be what's the most amount of balls that are bowling balls that you can carry efficiently. So we want you to be able to move without too much stress on yourself, that you can move quickly, right? So if we establish that it's like 4, then we're doing chunks of 4 bowling balls. And that's what you're going to do. 4 bowling balls, carry from here to there. 4 bowling balls, carry from here to there, right? And you're moving quickly. You never bog down, right? As opposed to trying to carry all that. So you chunk the files, right? You break it up into little pieces. But you got to think, where is this going? I'm taking in from the security master, just like I did with the fix logs, only what I need, right? But ultimately, you're talking about tens of thousands of rows. I think in some cases much, much more than that. So ultimately, even taking just the fields I need and getting rid of the fields I don't need, it's going to accumulate to a lot of data and therefore risk. We want to minimize the resources, how much RAM, how much CPU, right? So we take just the fields we need, but even that is still going to be potentially a lot of data because you need to do something with it, right? So you can do your processing later. So we use another technique, memory mapping. So with memory mapping, it's basically an indexing sort of idea. Instead of us grabbing all these fields and grabbing all this data and storing it in memory or something like that, what we're going to do is basically index the whole thing, right? So we're going to, have a sort of a shorthand, if you will. So at this location in memory, there is this, and in this location in memory, there's that. So we're going to store this sort of recording system index deal. So imagine, I guess in a dictionary analogy, instead of actually bringing the entire dictionary with you, what you do is you index the entire dictionary. So all the words that are in the dictionary, you have each word listed. A list of all the words in a dictionary is much less data than the entire dictionary, right? And then from this list or index, we can quickly find what we need. So I don't want to. So imagine let's swap from the bowling balls to the dictionary analogy. Now I'm using a different analogy. So let's say these dictionaries are really heavy, right? And we can't carry them, or carrying them would be very inefficient because it's heavy and we're going to be struggling and all that kind of stuff. So instead of doing that, we could sit down and write down an index of all the words in the dictionary, right? And what page each word is on. And then we carry that over, and that's light. That's maybe an index of an entire dictionary is maybe 10 pages or 20 pages, right? 10 or 20 pages, that's nothing. That's lightweight. So we can run with that. We can take it wherever we want to. Good to go. Then what happens next? What happens when we need to know the meaning of a word? We got the index. You pull up the index. You can scan through very quickly because instead of hundreds of thousands of pages, you only have 10 to 12 pages to look through. And you scan through the pages and you see, boom, there's the word that we're looking for. And it says it's on page 200. So now you go over to where the dictionary is and you grab just those pages that you need and you bring them over. So instead of storing all the data, you're storing an index to the data. So when you need it, you can quickly grab it because you have this, before you had, gigabytes and gigabytes of data, and to go through that will take forever. But if you index it, right, now you can quickly pull what you need when you need it, right? So that's the memory mapping, an indexing technique, and then you have the chunking. So using variations of those techniques to ingest the security master, ingest the fix log, only the fields that we need, right? Here's where I made a mistake. I was always focused on, one of the key things is I want to protect the server. This is designed for a production environment. I cannot bog down the server. So first of all, this application ended up being, I think, 5 or 6 different scripts. You want to isolate tasks instead of just having one huge file that's hard to maintain and understand. You want to isolate or compartmentalize your application. So, one Python script is the analyzer, which looks for the discrepancies. You have 2 parsers, a fixed parser, and you have a security master parser, right? You have the reporter, the thing that generates the report. You have now the resource monitor. So there's an application that was part of this application that all you're doing is you're the hallway monitor, or whatever you want to call it, right? It's sitting there and it's monitoring CPU and memory. It's monitoring resource utilization. And then when it exceeds certain thresholds that you configure, there's also a configuration part of it. There's a configuration script as well. The configuration script loads up the configuration, which includes the thresholds, maximum, max memory, max CPU. Once you exceed those values, I have this reactive logic that throttles the application to reduce memory. So for example, it can trigger garbage collection. So you're dumping stuff that you have in memory. Just clean up the memory, to free it up for other applications. You don't want to threaten the integrity of the server. And then the CPU There's a throttling in terms of, so what I was throttling is how many cores are being used. So there was a max. So it actually starts with, based on what's available, it'll grab as much as it can. If you hit one of the thresholds, it'll throttle down. So it'll say reducing cores to optimum or something. So instead of 4, it goes to 3. So it basically throttles how many cores are being used based on what the resource monitor sees is happening. Fundamental flaw with this design is it's reactive, right? It's kind of backwards. Essentially, what I was doing in my design is I was minimizing damage. Instead of preventing damage, I was minimizing damage. In order for my resource monitor to trigger and therefore have the application slow down a bit, in order for that to happen, it has to already go too far, right? We need a CPU spike that's above safe limits. We need a RAM utilization that's above safe limits. That event has to occur, which means at that moment, you could have caused a problem. Too much CPU, too much RAM, causing another application unrelated to crash or causing delays in this production server, which could cause risk, financial risk to the firm. Bad, bad, bad. It's good that I had the throttling. So again, it minimizes the damage. And this is a timing thing, right? It depends on when these spikes occurred and what was happening. If it happens to spike at the wrong moment, when a critical system was doing something and it needed a lot of resources, which got taken away by this process, that's where the losses come in. So you might get lucky, and if it spikes at the right time where it doesn't really affect anything, then you get away, hopefully, without causing a loss to the firm. But ideally, we don't want to have that exposure to begin with. So the fundamental flaw in my design was this reactive model. I don't want to wait until potential damage has occurred and then do mitigation after the fact. I want to never, ever have this thing spike the CPU and RAM to a dangerous level. I want to add an additional note. In proper production application design, there are things that you would and can do and should do to mitigate these types of risks. For example, CPU affinity or pinning cores. So if there's a critical application that's running on this box, depending on the risk level and all this kind of factors, we would want to sort of preemptively do things to safeguard these applications. So another application should not be totally vulnerable to, I think it's called what's the word I'm looking for? Contention, I think is the word. Well, basically it's a competing for resources, right? You have an application that needs the CPU to do some kind of processing, and you have another application that also needs the CPU as well. Who's going to get it, right? One application gets in the way of another application. Bad, bad, bad. So what you do with trade applications, again, it's depending on what the application is and a lot of other variables, but potentially what you do is you dedicate cores to particular applications. So I have a critical trade application. It has dedicated access to a particular core or CPU. So that means you don't have these contention situations where you're fighting for resources. This is my CPU, right? This is my CPU. You get your hands off of it, right? So you have full control of the CPU. So my other application, my reconciliation application, can't even touch that CPU to begin with. So things like that alone, that's good design to where my sloppy design would be sort of contained in terms of the damage that I can do. But beyond that, my application should be better designed to not be reactive. So the basic model in the next version I'm going to build is going to be a model where I'm going to start by building a wall, a resource wall around my application. So I am going to not wait for it to go too far and then react. I am going to make sure that it can't go too far in the first place. So for example, I can limit it to particular cores. I'm going to say, no, don't grab up every, that's the thing. I'm taking all that's available, right? If it's available, I'm going to use it. And then if it becomes a problem, okay, I'll back off. No. I want to put you in a little box, a safe box. I'm going to say, you only get 2 cores or 3 cores or 4 cores. Of course, depending on the total cores of the server and what's needed by other applications, I'm going to say, these are the cores that you get, and that's it. So even if you use up all the cores that you have access to, you're still only accessing a fraction of what the server has. Big production server, 128 cores, right? And I'm giving you just 10, right? So if you use up all 10, I mean, the server is going to be like, whatever, right? So that's the thing. I want to set these hard constraints where the worst case scenario of what this application can do is something that is safe, that will not cause harm to the other applications or to the server itself. So that is a fundamental thing. So that is my lesson, which I kind of made this assessment when I was testing the application, and I saw that there were a couple times that the throttling would get triggered, and I said to myself, if the throttling is triggered, that means the CPU usage and memory usage went higher than it should be for any period of time at all, even if it's microseconds, if it's a second or 2 seconds. That's not good. So I said, time to refactor. So when you're designing applications for a trading environment, all these things that I mentioned are things you want to always consider: security, compliance, efficiency, and protection of resources, right? You want to do isolation techniques where you, dedicate specific cores, limit how much cores it has access to. You set memory limits rather than a memory usage trigger. So instead of me saying, if you use more than this amount of RAM, then back off, I'm going to say, never use more memory than this, period. Right? Don't even go there. I'm gonna allocate. There's different ways you can do this, but I'm gonna somehow put the application in a box, in a resource box. So even out of control, in theory, because obviously there's bugs and there's unexpected scenarios, you try to sort of try to anticipate what things might go wrong. And if you have good QA and you have good SRE engineers, so site reliability engineers who do chaos engineering where they try to break it. If you do the things in the right way, ideally you shouldn't have any surprises, but no one's perfect. No system is perfect. So even with all these restrictions, there is a possibility that somehow you miss something and it could still spike the CPU. However, that would be an edge case. That would be strange. That would be something that's like, whoa. But if you do a reactive design like I did, it would not be strange. It would not be shocking that it uses up more resources than it should, because I designed it to be as fast as possible. I want to process the data as fast as possible, use as much as available. So that design inherently is going to, it's kind of biased to using up too much resources, right? Because if you're designing it and saying like, take up as much as is available and only back off when you go too far, I mean, you're setting yourself up for failure. If you design it in the other way where you isolate things and you limit things from the beginning, then for your application to get outside of that box is going to be much more unlikely. So hopefully this story helps you guys, and you've learned something from it. I've certainly learned from it, and in the future, when I design such applications, I will adjust my design philosophy to be not reactive. Reactive might work in another industry, but in investment banking, when, for example, we might put out $3 billion worth of exposure to the market in a 15-minute time frame, reactive, not so much. I could see this application in a bad scenario causing, for example, that process I mentioned. There's a closing auction, which is like, I think it's a 15-minute window. So I could see this process taking more than 15 minutes if the security master is massive, and delaying the closing auction process, and then some of your orders don't make it to the market, and that could be disastrous for so many reasons. Anyway, this is Carl Speaks Wall Street, and if you're interested in investment banking technology and deep dive videos like this, definitely subscribe. Until the next episode, thanks for watching, and don't forget to click on the like button. Thanks, guys.